Hi, good evening. Shalom to all of our supporters and friends, supporters of Israel. Welcome to the Never Again Live podcast. I'm Meir Weinstein. I'm joined with Meir Jolowitz. We're going to be discussing Israel-USA relations. There's been a lot going on right now in terms of a lot of questions people have right now about how strong that relationship is. When President Trump was sworn in, it seemed like it is rock solid, and it seemed like the previous administration that he had was completely rock solid with Israel. And the appointments that he made into his administration are fabulous appointments. The ambassador to Israel, for instance, Mike Huckabee, other people really on our side and taking a strong stand against anti-Semitism on the campuses and deportations of Hamas supporters and defunding of universities that spread anti-Semitism and accepting and embracing the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. But lately, there's been some questions going on. For instance, deals with Saudi Arabia and Qatar offering to give President Trump a plane, a jet to replace Air Force One to the tune of at least $400 million. And we know that no gift, there's no such thing as no strings attached to anything. An American Jewish hostage was released, and they want to have some kind of a ceremony about that with him in Qatar. Now, for a little bit of background, and I'm not going to take everything up, but I'm just putting some context. Qatar provides the funding, much of the funding for Hamas. So what's going on here? And there's talk about maybe some kind of recognition of a Palestine state, which flies into complete opposition to when the Trump administration says they don't use the term West Bank for the area that Israel won in the 67 war, Judea and Samaria. They use the terms Judea and Samaria. So what is going on? Meir, you're an expert on Israel affairs. Please inform us what's going on here.
Yeah, allow me by way of preamble to mention two things. One is this notion of expert. I've always complained whenever I lecture, when I'm on the radio, when I write my pieces, when I give speeches, that there are so many so-called experts who deal with Middle East affairs, and they are no experts.
Right.
The experts are the people who take what others consider a complex situation and they simplify it. That's where we stand. The so-called experts are the people who take a very simple situation and make it complex. There should be nothing complex whatsoever about the conflict in the Middle East. Never in the history of modern warfare has there been a situation where there's more of a right and a wrong in a conflict over whatever it is that they're fighting about. That's the first piece of my preamble. The second piece is that, and I have to say this by way of preface, Donald Trump, and I've said this before, is the best president that Israel will ever know and the best American president that Israel will ever know. There's no question about that.
Right.
And yet, all of a sudden, we find ourselves relegated to scratching our heads and not understanding what the hell is going on. And I will say this, Donald Trump is certainly a pro-Israel person. He's certainly not an expert in Middle East affairs. Donald Trump has several faults, and I will address them first. One, he doesn't understand that not every problem in the world has a solution. As such, he believes that every problem can be somehow negotiated. He believes that every problem, like any good business deal or any good real estate deal, can somehow be negotiated if the right buttons are pushed. That doesn't apply to the Arabs or the Muslims in the Middle East. Donald Trump has never read the Quran. He doesn't understand the Muslim mind. What Donald Trump fails to understand more than anything else, and I'm going to quote here someone who I was not very much a fan of, and that's Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger once said accurately so, a murderer can also be a liar. Donald Trump seems not to understand that. Some of us might have seen on social media the last 2 days, posted, because of what was happening in the Middle East, a sound bite. A video bite showing Donald Trump in 2017, when he was Donald Trump 45, in which he basically called out the Qataris and said that the Qataris are the supporters of terrorism in the Middle East, regionally, that they have to be dealt with. And he said they don't fool anyone, they support terrorism. The mistake that Donald Trump is making these days, notwithstanding that wonderful team of foreign policy people that he has, and when I say a wonderful team of foreign policy people that he has guiding him, the one person who I'm going to exempt from that category of wonderful, because I think he's an absolute derelict amateur who doesn't know what he's doing, is Steve Witkoff. He's an embarrassment. Steve Witkoff only knows real estate. He knows nothing about. Steve Witkoff belongs to this concept that if it's the same thing which Oslo was built on, that quiet will be met with quiet. He doesn't understand. But nonetheless, notwithstanding this wonderful team, you mentioned Mike Huckabee, who's not necessarily a power broker when it comes to making policy, but you're talking about Pete Hegseth, you talk about Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz when he was in that position. These people were wonderful people, are wonderful people, understand Israel, support Israel. Here's what Donald Trump himself, because he's the man who's running the show. Here's what he doesn't understand. As you had mentioned, Qatar is not an honest broker. They finance terrorism in the Middle East. They finance anti-Semitism to the tune of $7.1 billion on American campuses.
Right.
Egypt is no honest broker. Egypt supports Hamas. Egypt helped Hamas build some of the tunnels. And even today in Israel, some information came out that Egypt, head of Egyptian intelligence, was aware of the attack of October 7th prior to its happening. If you remember, he told the Israelis that nothing was going to happen. Turkey has been brought in as a possible mediator of sort. Turkey is an enemy of Israel. It is certainly no ally to the NATO concept as we know it. And then again, we talk about the others. Oman, which is supposed to be mediating this nuclear deal with Iran. It's absolutely remarkable. Iran has no interest in having a deal with the United States. Iran is interested in buying time. And the final point, which is the most important one, that Donald Trump misunderstands. We thought he understood it in February when he talked about getting them out of Gaza. We thought that he got it. Something's happened.
Yep.
He's a walking contradiction. What the point that he doesn't understand, which is my last point, is that the Palestinians are Hamas. It is, if you don't understand that, everything else that follows will be wrong. The Palestinians are Hamas. And all of a sudden, there's been a change of heart of sorts, in which he basically talks about the fact that they need humanitarian aid. We've got to help them. We're no longer going to chase them out. Let me sum it up by saying this. When it comes to politics of all kinds, especially foreign affairs, there are those people who are labeled optimists and those people who are labeled pessimists. A lot of times people, because of my analysis, have thought of me as a pessimist. I'm not. I'm in that big, expansive place in between the two, which is called realist. I believe in realism, not in optimism, not in pessimism, in realism. And realism has me scratching my head, because this is not the Donald Trump that I voted for twice, who I support wholeheartedly, who I will vote for a third time and a fourth time and a fifth time if given the opportunity. But here's the part that I'm hoping, and I'm not one who normally stages my worldview based on hope or prayer. But in this particular case, I will say this, Mayor. I'm hoping and I'm praying that all this background noise that you have described and that we're talking about now, I'm hoping is a ruse, is a ploy, is a strategy, is a cover for the fact that Israel and the United States do have something planned in which they're going to take out the nuclear military capability and perhaps even the oil fields of the Islamic Republic of Iran. If in fact that is not the case, if my out of character optimism in this particular case that will happen, If that doesn't come to fruition, we are in for a very, very sad future in the Middle East.
Let me add also to that. Part of the deal with Saudi Arabia is we're hearing about at least $1 trillion in investments from Saudi Arabia into the United States. So on the one hand, we have the Trump administration clamping down on universities that harbor anti-Semitism and don't hold anyone to account that spreads anti-Semitism. So the administration is very busy prosecuting that. And like I said before, they have adopted the IRA definition of anti-Semitism with $1 trillion coming in from Saudi Arabia. As a realist, Meir, is anti-Semitism going to start flourishing? And the other question to ask with that, does Saudi Arabia abide by the IRA definition of anti-Semitism? And I know they don't. So where are we going with this? And with Qatar, are they going to start financing the universities as well, spreading? So what kind of level of anti-Semitism are we talking about? We're only into this administration for not a long time. What is, if the strings are off and yes, we're financing your universities, what are we going to see?
By way of footnote, and thank you for that, by way of footnote, you mentioned that we're not very far along in the administration. One needs to keep in mind that November 2026 is a pivotal time. If, for example, if based on history and the historical trends, if the Republican Party isn't able to carry, well, they'll have the presidency, of course, the executive branch, but if they are not able to carry the House or the Senate, then everything that Trump thinks he can do, wants to do, everything that we've been hoping that would happen, is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But to come back to what you said, Saudi Arabia's foe, not friend. They also have a vested interest. The reason the Saudis have been friendlier to Israel than they had been yesteryear is because they have a common enemy. That common enemy is the Islamic Republic of Iran. When you mention the $1 trillion of investment, there is a misconception here. The number was going to be 600 billion, which Trump was happy. It basically feeds the military-industrial complex. The $600 billion that the Saudis were going to invest, and Trump leveraged them to give $1 trillion, is a gift to them. They aren't doing us a favor. We're doing them a favor. They have the money. I remember a study, an economic study, which was done in the mid-1970s when there was the oil boycott of North America, the United States. And at the time, the Saudis were asked, Sheikh Yamani was there. There was an op-ed, it was a great op-ed in New York Times, your money or your lives, whatever. And the comment was made that the Saudis were leveraging the United States because of the pressure of the oil embargo and everything else. And someone from Saudi Arabia was quite candid in saying that if we raise the price, because the cost of the barrel of oil, if we can raise the price in every American gas station, every American pump by 1 penny per gallon after the year, that money, that's what the economic forecast said at the time, would pay for their military needs by raising the gas 1 penny per gallon for a year. So the Saudis have the money, and that's where they want to spend it. They want to spend it. The United States is pretending that the Saudis are doing us a favor by buying 600 billion, or in this case, he wants $1 trillion. We're doing them a favor. And if there isn't the quid pro quo that we demand, and it appears that we've not yet demanded a quid pro quo, the talk about normalization of relations with Israel, what nonsensical stuff. We've been told that the Saudis said, well, there's a condition attached, the creation of a pathway to a Palestinian state. What nonsense. The Saudis don't want the Palestinians. They don't like the Palestinians. They don't care about the Palestinians. It's a game. It's a ruse, and they play it quite well. What the Saudis are concerned about is the Saudi future. And unspoken, and I saw it for the first time only 2 weeks ago, even though I first wrote about it in an op-ed 4.5 years ago, and I would venture to guess in my own radio show that I do on Patriot Radio in the States on Sundays, I would venture to guess that that everything for the Saudis, all roads lead to a nuclear, what they call civilian capability, which will morph into a military. The Saudis don't care about the Palestinians. They don't care about anything else. They have one thing in mind, and nobody is talking about it. As I said, for the first time I saw someone talking about it I think it was about 10 days ago, which is that the Saudis want American cooperation, which the United States ostensibly is willing to give them as long as it's civilian. This will be a tragic mistake. Donald Trump is not going to be president in 2029. He's not going to be president. And if it's J.D. Vance, we still have that same issue. Okay, Donald Trump is the only person that could have come in and played the cards that Israel needed to be played. And all of a sudden, we have this contradiction, confusion we don't understand. And I go back to one thing. If it isn't all part of a game that's being played, and it needs to be played immediately, because as you and I are talking right now, the Iranians are building the bomb. And once that bomb, if we haven't learned the lesson of North Korea, then God help this world. For me,
Absolutely.
the biggest concern in Saudi Arabia, the biggest concern is the fact that the United States might give them a back door into a nuclear civilian capability, which will be morphed into something much greater. To me, that's the greatest concern there is. And allow me, because I know that these segments are very short and we do them more frequently, just one of the comments. This whole thing that we see going on in the Middle East, Israel all of a sudden thought that they had the best friend. Israel is confused. All the pundits are talking about the fact that there is now great daylight between Israel and the United States and the whole thing. I just want to say one more thing. It's absolutely important. I've been lecturing for 50 years in Middle East affairs. For most of those 50 years, I had been speaking about the fact, obviously, this whole notion that Israel doesn't have a peace partner and everything else. September 13th, 1993, I had labeled until October 7th, I called it the darkest day in modern Israel's history. September 13th, 1993, which is when Rabin offered his feeble handshake to Yasser Arafat. We made our murderer kosher. We pretended we have a peace partner. Now, all of a sudden, someone said to me, well, Meir, October 7th obviously has now supplanted September 13th, 1993 as the most difficult day in the history of modern Israel, to which I say yes, but October 7th happened only because of Oslo of 93. If Israel hadn't pretended that there were neighbors who could be kept quiet, this notion of conceptia, the concept, where if you keep the people of Hamas happy, if you give them jobs in Israel, if 18,500 of them can come into Israel and work there, if their standard of living is higher than it is in other parts of the Arab world and so on and so forth, they will be quiet. This concept was a disaster which brought us October 7th. And this concept was born in Oslo in 1993. And in Israel, there's a war going on. It's a war of ideas between those to the right of center and those to the left of center. And those to the left of center still believe foolishly in this concept of Oslo. We are, Meir, in serious trouble.
Absolutely. Meir, we're going to take it up again. We'll do more of these podcasts. I was away for a little bit of time, but we're getting back on it again. Thank you very much for joining us. And whoever is watching, please share this on your social media platforms. We'd appreciate it. We'll reach a lot more people. Thank you very much, Meir. Shalom, shalom.
Thank you.